There is a compound that costs less than $3, has been documented in peer-reviewed science for over 40 years, and can measurably reverse the muscle loss that most people over 60 are told is simply a normal part of getting older. One serving per day, no prescription, no gym membership, no expensive protein shake with 17 ingredients you cannot pronounce. And yet, the majority of people over 55 are losing muscle right now, silently, steadily, invisibly. While the health and fitness industry generates over $200 billion a year selling them solutions that were never designed to solve the real problem. You have probably felt it without knowing what it was. The chair that suddenly feels harder to get out of. The staircase that requires more effort than it did 5 years ago. The grip that is not quite what it used to be. The fatigue that arrives earlier in the day and stays longer. You were told that was aging. It is not aging. It is a condition. It has a name, it has a mechanism, and it has a solution that has been available for decades, sitting quietly in scientific literature, used by elite military rehabilitation programs and sports medicine clinics, and almost entirely absent from the conversation your doctor has with you during your annual checkup. Stay with me, because what I am about to show you changes everything you have been told about your body after 60. The condition is called sarcopenia. Most people have never heard that word. That is the first problem. Sarcopenia comes from the Greek roots for flesh and poverty. Literally, the poverty of flesh. It is the progressive, involuntary loss of skeletal muscle mass and strength that begins, for most people, somewhere around the age of 35 and accelerates sharply after 50. By the time you reach 60, if nothing specific is done to counter it, you may already have lost between 15 and 30% of the muscle mass you had in your prime. By 70, that number can reach 40%. And here is what makes this particularly devastating. Muscle is not just about strength. Muscle is a metabolic organ. It regulates blood sugar. It supports your joints and spine. It produces proteins that protect your brain. It governs your balance, your reaction time, and your ability to recover from illness. When you lose muscle, you do not just get weaker. You get sicker, slower, more fragile, and more dependent. In ways that look like a dozen different problems, but all trace back to the same root. Doctors see those symptoms in isolation. They prescribe blood pressure medication for the cardiovascular effects. They recommend joint supplements for the structural collapse. They offer antidepressants for the fatigue and low mood. They treat each branch of the tree while the trunk quietly rots. Here is what the science actually shows. Sarcopenia is now recognized as one of the primary drivers of disability, hospitalization, and mortality in people over 65. A study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that low muscle mass was a stronger predictor of death in older adults than obesity, diabetes, or high cholesterol. Read that again. Stronger predictor of death than obesity, than diabetes, than high cholesterol. Those three conditions have entire industries, entire government campaigns, and entire pharmaceutical pipelines dedicated to addressing them. Sarcopenia gets a pamphlet about eating more protein and going for walks. Why? Because the solution, the real solution, is not a patented drug. It is not a procedure. It is not something that requires a lifetime of prescriptions to maintain. And I am going to show you exactly what it is. But first, I need you to understand what is actually happening inside your body. Because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Your skeletal muscles are made of bundles of fibers. Think of them like thick ropes composed of thousands of individual threads twisted together. Each thread is a muscle cell, and each muscle cell contains long chains of proteins called myofibrils that slide across each other to generate movement and force. Now, muscle tissue is remarkable because it is constantly being broken down and rebuilt. Every single day of your life, your body is simultaneously destroying old, damaged muscle proteins and building new, stronger ones. This process is called muscle protein turnover, and in a young, healthy body, the building side of that equation stays slightly ahead of the breakdown side. That balance is the key to everything. After 50, something shifts. And it shifts for several reasons operating simultaneously. First, your anabolic hormone levels, testosterone, growth hormone, IGF-1, decline significantly. These are the hormones that signal your muscle cells to rebuild. When they drop, the signal weakens. Second, your muscles become less sensitive to that signal. This is called anabolic resistance, and it is one of the most poorly understood aspects of aging in mainstream medicine. It means that even when your body is trying to rebuild muscle, the cells are not listening as well as they used to. You can eat the same amount of protein you always have and get dramatically less muscle synthesis out of it. Third, chronic low-grade inflammation. The kind that has no obvious symptoms but runs continuously in the background, actively accelerates muscle breakdown. Scientists call this inflammaging, the slow inflammatory fire that burns hotter as you get older, silently consuming the structural tissue your body needs to stay strong. And fourth, most people over 60 are in a state of chronic mitochondrial decline. The mitochondria are the energy factories inside your muscle cells. When they deteriorate, your muscles produce less force, fatigue faster, and recover more slowly. 4 simultaneous mechanisms, all pulling in the same direction. All largely invisible until the damage is significant. This is not a simple problem. This is a systems failure. And that is exactly why the standard advice, eat more chicken, do some squats, does not move the needle for most people in their 60s and 70s. But here is where the story gets interesting. Because buried in the research, and I mean buried, behind journal paywalls and inside conference proceedings that the average person will never read, there is a compound that addresses all 4 of those mechanisms simultaneously. Not a drug, not a procedure, a naturally occurring molecule that your body already knows how to use. A molecule that was first studied seriously in the 1970s, confirmed again and again across decades of independent research, and still sits almost completely outside the awareness of most people over 50. I am going to show you exactly what it is and exactly how it works. But I need you to understand one more thing first. The year is 1976. A biochemist at the University of Wisconsin named Dr. Stephen Nissen is studying amino acid metabolism in livestock. He is trying to understand why certain animals maintain dramatically better muscle mass under conditions of physical stress and caloric restriction. What he discovers is a metabolite, a downstream breakdown product of the amino acid leucine. The body naturally produces small amounts of it. Animals that produce more of it maintain muscle tissue significantly better under stress. Animals given supplemental amounts of it show measurably reduced muscle protein breakdown. The compound is called beta-hydroxy-beta-methylbutyrate. In the scientific literature, it is almost always referred to by its initials, HMB. Nissen spends the next 2 decades quietly building the research base. He is meticulous and methodical. By the 1990s, he has moved from animal studies to human trials. The results are consistent across populations. HMB reduces muscle protein breakdown. It increases muscle protein synthesis. It lowers markers of muscle damage following exercise. It accelerates recovery. In 1996, Nissen publishes a landmark paper in the Journal of Applied Physiology, showing that HMB supplementation in healthy adults produced significant increases in lean muscle mass and strength over an 8-week period. The study made waves in sports science. Military rehabilitation programs took notice. Elite athletic trainers took notice. And then, slowly but surely, the research moved in a direction that almost nobody in the fitness industry wanted to acknowledge. Because the population where HMB showed the most dramatic and consistent results was not 22-year-old athletes. It was people over 60. A clinical trial published in the journal Nutrition in 2014 studied adults over 60 who were placed on complete bed rest. the kind of immobilization that happens during hospitalization or serious illness. The group receiving HMB lost dramatically less muscle mass than the placebo group. Not slightly less, dramatically less. We are talking about a difference that would take months of intensive physical therapy to recover. Another study, published in the journal Age in 2014, gave HMB to healthy adults over 60 for 24 weeks, combined with a basic exercise program. The HMB group gained 6 pounds of lean muscle mass. The placebo group gained less than 1 pound. 6 pounds versus 1 pound. Same exercise, same diet, same age. The only difference was 3 grams of a naturally occurring compound per day that costs less than $3 at any supplement retailer. A meta-analysis published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition reviewed the combined data from multiple HMB trials in older adults and concluded that HMB supplementation produced consistent, statistically significant improvements in muscle mass and physical performance, with no clinically meaningful adverse effects. The research is not obscure. It is not fringe. It is not coming from one lab with a financial interest. It is replicated, peer-reviewed, and consistent. And yet, here is the question you should be asking right now. Why have most people over 60 never heard of it? Here is the honest answer. And it is not a conspiracy. It is something more ordinary and more frustrating than a conspiracy. It is a business structure. HMB is a naturally occurring compound. It cannot be patented in its basic form. Any supplement manufacturer can produce it. It is dirt cheap to make. A month's supply at the clinically studied dose costs between $12 and $25 depending on the brand, and the raw material cost is a fraction of that. Now compare that to the pharmaceutical industry's vision of what sarcopenia treatment should look like. There are currently multiple drug candidates in development specifically targeting muscle wasting in older adults. These are patentable. They will require prescriptions. They will be reimbursable by insurance. When they reach market, if they reach market, a course of treatment will cost hundreds of dollars per month. That is a business model. That is a revenue stream. That is a pipeline. A $20 monthly supplement that anyone can buy without a prescription is not a business model the pharmaceutical industry celebrates. It is a threat they prefer to minimize. And the fitness industry is not much better. Walk into any supplement store aimed at people over 50. What are they selling? Complex multi-ingredient formulas with branded proprietary blends, aggressive marketing, and price points between $60 and $120 per month. HMB is sometimes buried inside those formulas, listed as one ingredient among 30, at doses too low to matter, surrounded by fillers and marketing language. The full clinical dose, standalone, inexpensive. That is not what they put on the front shelf. Meanwhile, your doctor almost certainly does not bring it up during your annual checkup. Not because your doctor does not care, but because sarcopenia is not a condition with a billing code that drives a referral. It is not a metric that gets flagged in your blood work, and HMB is not something covered in the continuing medical education courses that most physicians rely on to stay current. Because those courses are largely funded by pharmaceutical companies who have no interest in HMB being the answer. The knowledge is sitting in the research. It is accessible to anyone willing to spend time in scientific databases. But the path from research to routine clinical recommendation requires infrastructure, advocates, funding, marketing, policy pressure. And HMB has none of that, because there is no company making $1 billion a year off it that can afford to build that infrastructure. Your muscle is disappearing, and the system that should be catching it is looking somewhere else. But you are here now, and that changes things. Let me be specific, because the mechanism is what makes this so compelling and so relevant specifically for people over 50. When you exercise, or when your body experiences physical stress, your muscle proteins are damaged. This triggers a cascade of cellular signals. In a young body, Those signals very efficiently activate what are called satellite cells, the stem cells of muscle tissue, and initiate the repair and rebuilding process. HMB acts on this process at multiple points simultaneously. First, it inhibits an enzyme called proteasome that is responsible for breaking down muscle protein. Think of it as a slowdown signal to the destruction side of the equation. Less muscle protein being broken down means more net muscle tissue is retained. Second, HMB activates a cellular pathway called mTOR, the mechanistic target of rapamycin, which is the master switch for protein synthesis inside muscle cells. Activating mTOR tells your cells to build. This is the same pathway stimulated by leucine from dietary protein, but HMB activates it more directly and at lower doses. Third, HMB has been shown to reduce markers of systemic inflammation. Remember inflammaging, that chronic, low-grade inflammatory state that accelerates muscle breakdown? HMB appears to dampen that signal specifically in muscle tissue. Fourth, and this is particularly relevant for anyone over 60, HMB supports mitochondrial biogenesis. That is, the process by which your muscle cells create new energy-producing mitochondria. Better mitochondria means more force output, faster recovery, and less fatigue. 4 mechanisms. The same 4 mechanisms that drive sarcopenia, addressed simultaneously by a single compound your body already recognizes and uses. And here is the part that matters most for people who are not exercising intensively. Most muscle-building interventions require significant physical stimulus to produce results. Heavy resistance training, progressive overload, high protein intake. These all work, but they require your body to be able to generate and recover from significant stress. For someone dealing with joint pain, cardiovascular limitations, or simply decades of sedentary habits, that bar can feel impossibly high. HMB is one of the few compounds that shows measurable muscle preservation effects even in the absence of intense exercise. The bed rest study I mentioned earlier, those patients were not exercising, they were immobilized, and HMB still protected their muscle tissue. That does not mean exercise is irrelevant. It absolutely is not. Exercise, combined with HMB, produces the best results. But for someone starting from a low baseline, HMB lowers the barrier to entry in a way that almost nothing else does. Let me give you the practical information because this is where most health content fails people. They build the case and then leave you guessing about what to actually do. The clinically studied dose of HMB across the majority of trials is 3 grams per day. That is 3,000 milligrams. Most studies split this into 3 1-gram doses taken throughout the day, one with each meal, because this approach maintains more consistent blood levels. Some more recent research has shown benefit from a single 3-gram dose, particularly when taken before exercise or before a prolonged period of physical inactivity, such as a long flight or a day of bed rest. HMB comes in 2 forms. The first is calcium HMB, the form used in most of the original research. The second is HMB-free acid, a newer formulation that appears to be absorbed faster and may produce more rapid effects on muscle protein synthesis. The free acid form is more expensive. The calcium form is cheaper and has the larger research base behind it. Both appear effective. When evaluating a product, look for standalone HMB supplements rather than proprietary blends. You want to know exactly how much HMB you are getting per serving. 3 grams is the target. If a product lists HMB as part of a blend without specifying the dose, put it back on the shelf. A month's supply of standalone calcium HMB at 3 grams per day costs between $12 and $25 from reputable suppliers. This is not a price point that suggests exclusivity or miracle-level complexity. It is a simple, inexpensive, well-documented compound. Expected timeline based on the research. Measurable improvements in muscle recovery and reduced soreness typically appear within 2 to 3 weeks. Statistically significant changes in lean mass, when combined with even moderate resistance activity, typically emerge between 6 and 12 weeks. This is not an overnight transformation, but it is a consistent, documented, biologically grounded process of rebuilding tissue that was being lost without your awareness. One important note for anyone managing kidney disease or significant metabolic conditions: consult your physician before beginning any supplement protocol. HMB has an exceptionally clean safety profile in healthy older adults, but your individual medical situation always takes priority. I want you to sit with something for a moment. You have been aging for decades. If you are over 55, you have likely had at least one conversation with a doctor, a family member, or yourself about getting weaker, getting slower, or feeling less capable than you used to. You may have attributed it to bad genetics, to inactivity, to simply the inevitable march of time. You were told a story about aging. That story had a villain, time itself, and no solution. It was a story that ended in decline and dependency. That story is incomplete. The research on sarcopenia, on HMB, on muscle protein metabolism in older adults has been accumulating for 40 years. It sits in journals. It sits in conference proceedings. It sits in the training manuals of sports medicine physicians and military rehabilitation specialists. It has been confirming the same conclusions over and over. Muscle loss after 50 is not inevitable. It is a biological process with identifiable mechanisms and addressable causes. The tools to address it are not expensive. They are not exotic. They do not require a prescription or a specialist or a procedure. What they require is awareness. The awareness that the condition exists. The awareness that it has consequences far beyond simple weakness. The awareness that something can be done about it. And here is why that awareness matters beyond your personal health. Sarcopenia is estimated to cost the United States healthcare system over $18 billion per year in direct medical costs. Hospitalizations, rehabilitation, fall-related injuries, long-term care. That number does not include lost productivity, lost independence, or the enormous emotional and economic toll on families. An 80-year-old who maintains strong muscle mass is not just personally healthier. They are less likely to fall, less likely to be hospitalized, less likely to require long-term care, less likely to lose independence. They contribute more, cost less, and live better. 3 grams per day of a $20 per month supplement has the potential to bend that curve. Not for everyone, not miraculously, but consistently and measurably across diverse populations, confirmed by independent researchers with no financial stake in the outcome. The forest did not hide this knowledge. The research did not disappear. It was simply never placed in front of you, because the system you depend on for health information is not primarily organized around your best outcome. It is organized around revenue, around reimbursement codes, around patented interventions and recurring prescriptions. You are allowed to be angry about that. You are also allowed to simply use the information and move forward. Here is what I want you to take from this. Sarcopenia is real. It is measurable. It is already affecting you if you are over 50, and it is accelerating if you are over 60. The weakness, the fatigue, the joint stress, the balance problems, the blood sugar instability, the slow recovery, these are not separate problems accumulating randomly. They are often the same root problem expressing itself in different tissues. HMB does not cure sarcopenia. Nothing does. But it is the most well-documented, accessible, and affordable compound we have for slowing its progression and supporting the rebuilding process, particularly in the population where the research shows it matters most. 3 grams per day. Standalone calcium HMB from a reputable supplier. Taken consistently alongside whatever level of physical activity is realistic for your body and your situation. That is the starting point. The next step is movement. Any movement. Walking, bodyweight exercise, resistance bands, pool exercise. The research consistently shows that the combination of HMB and physical activity outperforms either one alone. You do not need to be an athlete. You need to be moving in some direction. And the third piece is dietary protein. The research on protein needs in older adults is remarkably clear. Most people over 60 require significantly more protein than standard dietary guidelines suggest. Approximately 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day to maintain muscle protein synthesis at an adequate rate. Most people over 60 are eating about half that amount. Fix the protein. Add the movement. Add the HMB. That is not a complex protocol. That is a straightforward biological strategy grounded in 4 decades of peer-reviewed research. And it starts with knowing the condition exists. It starts with knowing your body is not simply betraying you. It starts with knowing there is a mechanism and there is a response. That knowledge was sitting in the research this entire time. Now it is sitting with you. If this changed the way you see what your body has been going through, if it gave you a name for something you have been feeling for years, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone over 50 who has been quietly accepting weakness as inevitable. Someone who deserves to know that the decline they are feeling is not a sentence. The next video in this series is going to show you the specific dietary mistake that over 70% of people over 60 are making every single morning. A mistake that actively blocks muscle protein synthesis for the first 4 hours of the day, no matter how much protein they eat for the rest of it. If you do not want to miss that, subscribe now. Because the information exists, it has always existed. The only question is whether it reaches you in time to matter.